Keith, one of the characteristics of breakthrough companies was upping the ante as the business grows. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite subjects because I, like everybody else, believe that, the myth that entrepreneurial leaders are big risk takers. And so we gave a psychological profile to more than 5,000 entrepreneurial leaders over 5 years. And what we discovered is it's not true at all. In fact, what we discovered in the 5,000 people we surveyed is that entrepreneurial leaders are distributed normally across the entire risk-taking spectrum. Some are very, very risk-averse and some are very risk-tolerant. But we found even a more interesting outcome of the study, and that is there's some evidence to suggest that as companies become more successful, their leaders become more risk-averse. And in fact, economists have written about this. It's a concept called loss aversion. And it suggests is if you're playing poker and you get up a little bit in the game, you actually fail to make bets, even when the odds of you making a lot of money are high. So this concept of loss aversion pervades all of our lives, but is especially true in the entrepreneurial setting. So one of the things we have to focus on as leaders is we have to ask ourselves the question, is our company continuing to make big bets? We made big bets when we started the company, and that's why where we are today. But are we now beginning to play it safe? And we actually are convinced that the concept of playing it safe is also a myth. If you are not placing big bets on your business and your industry, and one of your competitors is placing the right bets, guess what? Over time, you will lose. So running a business is really all about sizing up the opportunities in your marketplace and learning how to continue to increase the size of your bet as the stakes of the game increase. One of my favorite examples from the book on this is a company from Little Roseau, Minnesota, up at the border of the U.S. and Canada called Polaris Industries. We all know Polaris Industries today, but often we don't understand where Polaris Industries started. And when Hall Wendell bought Polaris Industries in I think it was the mid-70s, essentially we were in a period of time in which it hadn't snowed for 7 years. The American manufacturers of snowmobiles had shrunk from 100 companies to 4, if you can imagine that. 96 had gone out of business, and Polaris was dead last, number 4, both in terms of market share and quality. Well, you can imagine how relieved the company was. By the way, their headcount got down to 16 people at one point, and those 16 people all took a 30% cut in pay. That's how tough things got in Roseau. And so you can imagine the relief in the staff when finally they kind of got some breathing room, and they moved their way up from 4th to 3rd to 2nd, and eventually got to be the number 1 snowmobile manufacturer in America, but still a relatively small company. And along comes their head of engineering, Chuck Baxter, and he says, hey, we ought to get into the ATV business. And everybody in the company, including Hall Wendell, the CEO, said, you're out of your mind. The people who own the ATV business are Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, big Japanese companies, 50 times our size, at a time in the early to mid-'80s where the Japanese were going to take over the world, if you remember that. But what happened was Polaris understood that if they didn't place the next bet, their company would be left behind. They and Arctic Cat were about the same size, and with their ATV bet, they leaped over Arctic Cat and became a really important business. But even more importantly, now 75% of Polaris's profits come from the ATV business. So they upped the ante with the right bet at the right time.